Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking out the best Houston sports podcast. Robert Land with Sports Radio 610, Shaun Bijani. If you're new to the show, welcome aboard. We have been in business now for almost 10 years. It's coming up in the next couple of weeks. Super pumped about that. 45 years in journalism between the two of us. If you don't know us, so you're in good hands. Later in the show, we talk about the return of Michael Brantley. But Shaun, all of a sudden, the Texans O-line in total shambles for week one. No Kenyon Green, no Juice Scruggs, probably no Titus Howard. Who's your best guess for the starters at center, left guard, and right tackle when we start up?
A tough guess. I'm going to try to talk through it because there are some new names that have been added to the equation, and the Texans are so thin that those new names in Josh Jones, Nick Broeker, however you say his name, and Alex Austin, they might factor in. I have no idea.
Oh, yeah.
The Texans brought back Michael Dieter onto the practice squad, and who knows how he factors in. He was getting the first team reps. But since Juice Scruggs was placed on IR Thursday as well, he's going to miss at least the first 3 games from what I understand in terms of the IR rules. I thought it was 4. I heard 3. So he's definitely missing the first game. So you're talking about starting lineup. My best guess, man, we'll start with left guard. I think it's probably going to turn out to be one of the new additions in Josh Jones or Nick Broeker. And the reason why I don't have Dieter there is because if you thought there was a question mark on Juice Scruggs stepping in, being thrown into the fire after Scott Quessenberry went down, then there's got to be 2 question marks for their 6th round pick in Jarrett Patterson. It's just been a limited sample size. So I'm just operating under the notion that a 6th round center who wasn't even getting number 2 reps when Scott Quessenberry was getting the 1s and was barely getting 2s when Juice Scruggs was the 1. I'm operating under the notion that Michael Dieter might actually have to play center, and he's been a starting level center in the NFL before with the Miami Dolphins. I'm not saying this is going to happen. You're asking me my best guess. I'll go unnamed new guy at left guard, Michael Dieter at center, and if George Fant has a really good week of practice, he'd already gotten a lot of reps with the 1s to this point. I would just presume that he would be the guy at right tackle. But again, Josh Jones, whom the Texans traded a 5th round pick to Arizona to get a few days ago, he's got most experience at right tackle. And I spoke to him the other day and I said, hey, what's your natural fit? What do you really feel comfortable with? And he's like, I just feel comfortable balling, but I get what you're saying. And he said, right tackle. That's what he played in college. He's got NFL experience, obviously at left tackle as well and guard position, but he said at the tackle position, that's what he would deem most natural. So maybe that is a big factor. Maybe you go Jones at right tackle, you go Dieter at center, and unnamed new guy at left guard. That's scary.
Yeah, I just don't see Dieter, who played left guard through most of what we saw with him. Jarrett Patterson by the end was playing center. Dieter was playing some left guard. I feel like those are their comfortable positions. So if you're going with current guys, I kind of like going with current guys. Here's the thing with Josh Jones. He was terrible at guard. He was good at tackle. If you're going to go with Josh Jones, you're going to play him at tackle. Mm-hmm. It's between him and George Fant. If they feel like he's up to speed on everything, then he starts. If not, then they're going to go with George Fant. Because like you said, they actually put capital out for Josh Jones to acquire him. And George Fant was just some guy that they randomly picked up. Now, as far as the 2 new guys, I just don't know if they're going to be up to speed. And really, Shaun, don't you think it's a little bit of comfort level? You just got not long to go before we start the season. And, if you look at Broeker, he's a rookie, is a guy that just 7th round rookie. And, maybe Kendrick Green, but Kendrick Green had a chance to win guard where he was and couldn't do it with the Steelers. At center, he was fine for a year at center, but he had a chance. So, I just didn't think Jarrett Patterson looked bad when he got the chance to play.
Here's the thing. I know we didn't look bad, and you're probably right. Maybe it's Jarrett. The only thing, my hesitation really there is the lack of experience. And I just remember the way that D'Amico talked about Juice Scruggs, I don't think Scott Quessenberry was really around long enough for anybody to really talk about him. It was like a week and a couple of days. But the way that people talked about Juice Scruggs commanding that line, thinking on the fly, making last-second line changes, just playing the position and looking like he'd been a veteran in the offense and doing so. That was really the most impressive. And then just being a road grader at run blocking, doing serviceable job, as far as I could tell at pass blocking. I don't think he gave up any pressures during his time there. And what little I saw of him in camp at that position running with the ones, it looked pretty freaking good. The thing is Jarrett Patterson up to speed? Do you not want to put the most experienced guy there that has the offense down the best? Maybe that's Jarrett Patterson, maybe knowledge, ability to handle the line similarly to Juice Scruggs. I know Patterson, it was 6th round pick. I don't really care about where these guys were drafted. It just comes down to is the guy going to ball or not? How much of a grasp of the offense and the line does he have? That's really what it comes down to. That line of thinking, yes, comfortability, since Patterson's assumed the position already, albeit, again, another one of those guys thrown into the fire. Josh Jones, his natural position, maybe Michael Dieter at left guard. I think it's fair. I'd totally forgotten about Kendrick Green, but maybe Green and Broeker and Alex Austin and even the other Dieter guy who they have on the practice squad now, along with Michael Dieter Iceland.
Sprockets. It's Sprockets all over again, baby.
Yeah. He's a second-year player out of Yale. Those guys, their bodies, maybe at this point, maybe they don't factor in. Maybe they come along swiftly, but you're just going to need to develop quality depth because right now they don't have it. They're just trying to piece together, like you said, our conversation is starting offensive line. And outside of Laramie Tunsil and Shaq Mason, you don't really feel good about anybody.
Get in the comments. Tell us what you think, who you think is going to start. You mentioned Kendrick Green, and, this is somebody that was a 6th-round pick. They gave up a 6th-round pick, I should say, for Kendrick Green, but he was much better than a 6th-round pick. He was a 3rd-round pick. He's the evil brother of Kenyon Green, I guess, right? He's the evil brother. Sean, feel free to add anything on this, but Kendrick, he played 975 snaps in 2021. He allowed 3 sacks, posted a 52.4 Pro Football Focus grade. Not great, but much better than Scott Quessenberry did last year. Also, the Steelers last year tried to move Kendrick from center to guard, but he lost a camp battle for the spot, and then he was inactive every game. In college, he was a second-team All-American. Yeah, healthy inactive, but he was a second-team All-American at Illinois. Anything I missed?
Well, in recent weeks, they tried him out at fullback in Pittsburgh. So to me, that just went and showed you the lack of faith that they had in this guy to even consider him having a future on the offensive line. The video that I saw of him at fullback actually looked pretty darn good. And so it even had me thinking for a hot second, what are the Texans doing here? Are they that light at fullback position? Do they not like Keen? Do they need a bigger body? So they trade a 6th-round pick in 2025 for a project at fullback. They already got one in Troy Hairston with a herniated disc on IR. It's what are they doing? I've heard some really good points about Kendrick Green, and maybe it's the case. If you look at the way that the Steelers offense, how they're employing their linemen, it's more
they're more of a straight up blocking, where the Texans are zone scheme. This might be a zone. They're talking about this guy might just be a zone scheme guy.
That's what I was getting to. They're more of a smash mouth scheme up in Pittsburgh. Maybe he's a better fit, here in Houston at the zone scheme. When I talked to Chris Strouser a few weeks ago, big, strong, powerful, athletic, Kendrick Green embodies all of that on the surface. And it's shown through on the film, obviously, with his ability to move around and play multiple positions. It's going to be a project. And look, ultimately, you're trying to develop quality depth. And maybe he's a guy here. Nobody needs him to be a guy long-term. You just need to be able to come in and, like D'Amico Ryan said on Wednesday, just get the job done. I translated that to, as thin as they are on the offensive line right now, you guys just got to figure it out. And look, I think it lends itself to a much larger conversation in terms of culpability and accountability. D'Amico and Nick Caserio both included. You have to put them both in there. The way that they mishandled, I think, this offensive line in terms of obtaining quality depth at an early stage.
Okay, they also picked up Nick Broeker. We mentioned him off the waiver wire from the Bills. 7th-round pick just a couple of months ago. You go, well, 7th-round pick. I don't know, but the Texans were one of 4 teams, 4 of them that claimed him off the waiver wires. He's one of the most coveted guy off the waiver wires. And besides guard, Broeker played left tackle at Ole Miss. He's got some versatility to him. Lance Zierlein projected him, Sean, as a 5th-round pick, but also said he doesn't see him as his own blocking guard. Yeah, he's somebody that, though, is not super powerful. So I feel like his benefit, if you look at him from an offensive line perspective, is more mobility than, as a power guy, because he's small for a guard.
Yeah, and again, like you mentioned, a rookie, right? I mentioned the word project already as well. Maybe they're looking at him as like a possible fit. Now you see the body change, the strength, developing NFL strength, with these guys that you take a chance on later in drafts around year 2. Right. That's what we were anticipating with Kenyon Green, and understandably so to a degree. The knee arthroscopic surgery this offseason, surgery coming into his rookie year, and now he's dealing with the shoulder injury that we find out he'd had since at least May. Obviously held him back quite a bit. You could see it. A lot of us, that are used to seeing him every day, didn't see the body change, didn't see the strength change. I saw a guy that looked out of shape, that just wasn't football ready. The way that Nick Caserio described John Mechie to me yesterday, it looks like a guy that hadn't played football in 18 months. Kendrick Green didn't look much better, to be quite honest with you. But now we know a little bit more of a reason why. Maybe Kendrick Green is a project just as though they view Nick Broeker. Maybe not a system fit in terms of a guy you're evaluating coming out of college, but with a little NFL experience, he's had an entire offseason program, albeit with a different organization. Look, just like we talk about offensive coordinators, head coaches, they look at a quarterback and think, you know what, I can do something with that guy. I can help him. I can fix him. Maybe Chris Strouser, those guys standing on the table saying, hey, we need help on the offensive line. I could do something with this cat. You never know. It's just TBD, and that's the scary part, once again, about this offensive line.
Yeah, you talk about Kenyon Green and the injury, and when he got hurt in the Saints game, and I just have to make a quick, sort of a side note on this. I heard a lot of Houston radio personalities, including a couple of your stations, Sean, at Sports Radio 610, making fun of Kenyon and accusing him of faking the injury. I was not thrilled with that. I was not thrilled with that. There was this, this idea.
Who said it? I want to know who said that.
I could have sworn I heard Seth Payne and Pendergast. I heard Payne and Pendergast talking about that and kind of saying, it looked like he was trying to do something there because he got beat on the play, and he got taken to the medical tent. I mean, they don't do that if they feel like this. They thought this was very real, and I just think it's out of bounds to question an NFL player without some proof.
I could see that kind of tongue in cheek early on, like maybe on a post game show where you just don't know anything at that point, or maybe even the next morning of. But hell, it was a Saturday game, was it? No, it was a Sunday night game. So
it was the next morning. It was the next morning.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, maybe slightly out of bounds still, because me, I'm just not a fan of. We've had this conversation about the same guy. I'm not a fan of criticizing somebody for not loving the game, not trying very hard, certainly faking an injury on a play that he gotten beat badly on. Look, if Kenyon Green wanted to fake injury, if his feelings got hurt, he had plenty of opportunity to do that last year for a month straight when he was facing murderer's row of interior defensive linemen, and he got his ass handed to him. And he didn't. He buckled it up, and I guarantee I wasn't the only one that lauded him for going out there, busting his ass, and probably playing hurt through that. And it gets to a certain point to where it's really no different than Derek Stingley, than Dameon Pierce, one of your rookies, Kenyon Green. Look, it would have been totally understandable if you pull that guy out. You could have pulled him out probably 2 weeks before you did. He only played 15 games last year. And it would have been understandable that, you save this guy and you make sure he's right healthy. He's right health-wise.
And if anybody should be criticized as far as any of this, it sounds like the Texans kind of knew a little bit about what was going on with his shoulder.
100%. And that was, to me, that was the story of the day yesterday. Nick Caserio offering up, which he didn't have to. I mean, in my opinion, the fact that they'd said they'd known about this back in May, and that it was a question of when and not if that Kenyon was going to aggravate this shoulder. And I think that's what they meant. I don't think you're forecasting like this guy's going to end up on season-ending IR, but it was a question when or not if this guy's shoulder was going to flare up and be a problem. They knew back in May. That's what Caserio said. The other thing is addressing it. And look, I get they've tried Michael Dieter at the position whom they'd signed back in March. I get that they brought in Keaton Sutherland, but he himself got hurt and then was brought back and then cut and now brought back, I think, on the practice squad again. Like, he's just a body. I haven't seen anything from him, and they moved him all over the place. So Beach and Sutherland and Dieter, any one of those guys to me can't hold Michael Dieter's jock, Kenyon included, in terms of overall performance in camp, in games. The guys
Well,
just look
remember,
like,
we were asking, why is Juice Scruggs playing guard instead of center?
maybe that was why, but you have to have depth at every position. One thing that we felt like, and I think you were in agreement with me on, is they had a lot of versatility about a week ago with the center guard exchange, right? Like, they had a lot of swing guys. Jimmy Morrissey, who at the time was, still on the team before being cut and brought back. They had a lot of guys that could play multiple positions, guard, center. The one thing that they needed is tackle. They addressed that with Josh Jones. But if you knew back in May that one of your projected starting linemen, like guaranteed dues, he's a 15th overall pick, he's going to start this season if he's healthy. If you knew that there was a prospect that he wasn't going to be healthy, you needed to go address that then. Make sure you got a quality guy.
Yeah, I don't know about that, because if it's May, it's after the draft, it's after free agency. If you're the Texans, in a couple of months, there's going to be some guys that are available that wouldn't have been available in May. And so you kind of have to be patient with that whole process. That doesn't bother me. It bothers me that they were trying to run Kenyon Green out there, maybe when he shouldn't have been run out there, period. And it's dangerous for a guy that you've invested a first round pick in.
And that's something else I mentioned the other day too. Why does Kenyon look this bad? To me, it felt like a guy that felt the pressure. He needed to do whatever was in his power to get on a football field.
If anybody should have commented on Kenyon Green, the comment should have been, hey, this guy is tough, because you know what? He had an issue and he was getting roasted and he didn't say a word about it.
D'Amico and Caserio, both mentioned how they appreciated Kenyon Green for working hard and getting on the field. But I think to a certain degree, you got to be careful. And maybe they themselves felt the pressure as well, because they knew the lack of depth that was behind them. So it's like, hey, we're going to let this guy give it a go. If it works, it works. If it don't, it don't. It's a built-in excuse. At least we could point to the fact that, we brought in a center guard swing guy in Michael Dieter a couple of months before, and it looks like we addressed it there. But it just looked really bad 24 hours ago when the guy that you brought in for quality depth, you cut. Looks a little bit better. Maybe it's more excusable now that you bring Dieter back on the practice squad. He probably slots in at that left guard position, and things aren't looking that bad going forward. It's just the process and how you got there, I think, was initially a really, really bad look on the Texans. Ultimately, I got to believe in Kenyon that he just was thinking, I got to do whatever I can to get on this field. The knee held me back, getting my body where I wanted it to get to, but I've got something to prove, to my teammates, to the organization, and I got to show them that I want this bad, and it just didn't work. Hopefully, this reset of sorts, he gets the shoulder healthy, the knee gets to be 100%, and he's ready to just hit the ground running next year. That's the best you can hope for.
The Texans, besides Nick, is it Broeker or Broeker? Am I pronouncing it wrong? Is it?
I don't know.
Broeker?
Pick one. I did the same thing.
He was joined by a guy who was also grabbed off the waiver wire from the Bills, cornerback Alex Austin. And Alex Austin, who I think you can only say it Alex Austin. It could be Alex A. Houston, but I'm going to say Austin. Alex Austin, another 7th round pick that they had this year. Lance Zierlein had him as a potential 4th or 5th round pick on NFL.com. And it's kind of interesting, Shaun, that Caserio waives Desmond King and picks up a 7th round pick. What are you thinking about that?
I mean, Desmond King was one of the surprise cuts. Obviously, I mean, look, he's literally one of the major reasons why you felt as comfortable with the secondary as you did in the offseason. I mean, sure.
Biggest surprise, do you think, of all the cuts?
Biggest surprise, outside of initially Dieter, it was King. Yeah, I guess so. I guess you have to, unless I'm blanking on one. I don't have the list in front of me. So many names and moves over the course of just the last 24 hours. It all kind of runs together. But yeah, I mean, I guess so. And it would make sense, right? Outside of Jalen Pitre, Jimmy Ward, Derek Stingley, Steven Nelson, hey, he's your best nickel corner, right? I mean, Javier Thomas missed basically all of training camp last year. I think he had to wait until week 4, week 5 to become activated off of IR. And when he was out there, he was a good player. But guess what? Desmond King would have been, a better than average corner on a lot of football teams. In fact, his new team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, according to PFF, who I think he graded out about a 72, 73 last year, he would have been the second best corner on their team last season. He was your nickel corner for the first 9 weeks last year, and weeks 10 through 18, they moved him around all over the place. Sometimes he played inside. He usually played outside at that point in time. When Derek Stingley went down, they needed depth there, and he was a good guy, and he'd played the position before. He fit right in, made some plays. Certainly a hell of a lot better tackler in the secondary than most, what they were trotting out there at that point in time. But it's one of those things that sometimes, in Desmond King's case, it doesn't make sense on a football level. But just from what I heard, there were other things that preceded his reputation with the Texans that they hadn't forgotten about, and it wasn't a culture fit going forward. And they made the tough decision to let him go and find depth elsewhere. So sometimes those are things, and that make people scratch their heads. But ultimately, when you hear as much about culture and how important it is to establish D'Amico's in his first year, that those are going to be some of the hard moves you have to make.
Yeah, we make a big deal that this is a Caserio decision, but this is an organization decision. This is D'Amico's involved. But I will say that Caserio had to cut 5 of his draft picks this year. 5 guys that he's picked over the years. Thomas Booker, 5th round, 2022. Garrett Wallow, 5th round, 2021. Austin DeCoulis, 6th round, 2022. Roy Lopez, another surprise cut for some people, 6th round, 2021. And Brandon Hill, 7th round, 2023. What do you think about that?
Now, you mentioned the other guy that I was trying to think of. I knew there was one that made me raise my eyebrows. It was Roy Lopez. I had him making the team.
Yeah.
The body transformation, the guy flashing, routinely in games. That was a difficult one. That was really, really difficult. I wouldn't have made the same move, clearly. But that is another L for Caserio. If you're keeping score at home, they weren't exactly swimming in draft capital when he took this job in 2021. And you cut 5 guys, granted, later round picks, but nevertheless, 5 guys whom you spent draft capital on that are no longer on this team, that hadn't been on it even through 3 seasons. That's a tough look, especially when you're keeping score elsewhere about, how he handled the Brandon Cook situation last year, some of the weird trades that he's made, moving up for guys or moving back for guys. Kenyon Green is still there. He's attached to that one.
I don't think he likes later round picks, because if you pay attention, Sean, he likes to trade later round picks. He sometimes trades them to move up, which is, that's a good way to use them. And it's, it's perfectly fine. And a lot of later round picks, they're not going to hit anyway. We know this. And the Texans have a long history of not hitting late round picks. But the other thing that you notice, what he does like to do a lot with those later round picks, is he kind of shuffles them around. And then now he's using them to trade for other players. And maybe that's better for him. Maybe it's better to trade for a Josh Jones with that 5th round pick than actually, take somebody that's probably not going to work anyway. At least Josh Jones can play a little football.
That could be one of the better trades. Let's just see how that turns out.
He's going to have to re-sign them, though. Re-sign him after this, because I think doesn't his contract ends after this season? Or?
Yeah, big deal. Final year of a rookie deal. Who cares? I mean, everybody else is basically on a 1-year deal anyway. And the roster turnover from last year to this year, the Texans are have the 6th highest turnover rate in the entire league at about 49, almost 50%. And the roster is going to continue to churn. You make an argument that last year was year 1 of the rebuild, so to speak, just in terms of, what they did in the draft and maybe some free agent acquisitions. This is really the first year, obviously, with the head coach. You're going to see what you got and then kind of go from there. So I would expect more roster churn. But hey, I mean, if you got the picks, you got the capital, use them. And I'd rather use it on a guy that has NFL experience already, just using Josh Jones as an example, at one of your most desperate positions of need on the offensive line. It's a no-brainer. And Jones, didn't sound like that he was in the running for a starting job in Arizona, if I recall reading what I did correctly.
Oh yeah.
He was on the outside looking in, and that organization this year is quite similar to the Texans, knowingly and very public about them going nowhere. It's going to be interesting to see how they play that Kyler Murray news, by the way. It's like, you hear the report today. He's playing. Yeah, just give the fans that little shred of hope. Get out of here. He's not playing this year, coming off of that knee injury and the amount of money they have invested in him. And I think he saw the writing on the wall there.
I'm more worried. I mean, I'm saying all this about the late round picks. I get more worried about the early round picks. I get more worried if Kenyon Green is a total bust. I get more worried if Stingley's a total bust. I don't think he will be, but those two guys, they had injury history coming in, and the injury history has bit them so far with both of those guys. So those are way bigger concerns. Yeah. But the better GMs, they tend to hit occasionally on those later, and he's going to have to hit on these later. And maybe Hutchinson is the guy. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe Hutchinson's a guy. I mean, Toa, later round pick. He could be a guy. Tegan Quatoriano, TBD, but he could be a guy. I really like him. He just needs to stay healthy, man. And that's the big caveat for everybody, really. But it'd be interesting to see, look at the Diana Rossini report about Davis Mills earlier, where teams have inquired about interest in trading for him. He was a 3rd round pick in 2021. Him and Nico Collins are the only 2 remaining picks that are on this team from that draft. If you could recoup a 4th or a 5th round pick for Davis Mills at this point in time, is that something that Nick Caserio sneezes at? Does he jump on it? I don't know. It only behooves the Texans to, I think, hang on to that guy, because the last thing you want is the reality to slap you in the face and CJ Stroud gets hurt. And next thing you know, you're trotting out a 35, 36-year-old Case Keenum to be your starting quarterback with EJ Perry as your backup. So I think the Texans are probably going to hold on to Davis Mills a little while longer, because ultimately in the quarterback market, the price only goes up if the dude's healthy.
Yeah, no, that's more of a deadline deal. And you see how things are going at that point.
Yeah.
Shaun, who did Jalen Pitre tell you he wanted to give a shout out to?
Oh, well, he did give a really good shout out to Johnathan Joseph. I was anticipating, and I was kind of trying to get him to say a player, and I think my question is people laud you for being a just fantastic guy in the film room. You're just operating at a different level. And I said, well, who in that room challenges you? And he immediately said Johnathan Joseph. I said, well, why? I mean, he just breaks the game down differently. Seth Payne was actually talking about it earlier this morning and said, everything that Pitre said about Joseph is true, and Seth obviously knows firsthand. But the problem with Joseph is that he'd helped everybody else out as well on other teams. He just didn't know how to keep it to himself and just help us out. He'd helped other corners out as well. I was impressed by that, and I think Pitre went on to say that he would not be shocked at all. I don't think any of us would either, to see Johnathan Joseph on the sideline near you at some point, much sooner than later.
Did you talk to him about that at all? Did he say anything about staying with the Texans during the season, or that potential down the road, or anything?
If he was made available, it was during the time where I was at the podium waiting on players and coaches, the last few practices of training camp. And so I didn't get a chance to catch up with him. And to my knowledge, I haven't seen anything where anybody's asked him. And the only question that I would ask him at this point in time is, well, how was it? Did you get bit by the bug? And if he says yes, or something even close to that, that's a pretty darn encouraging thing to hear from one of the most important non-paid members of this coaching staff, and Johnathan Joseph, this training camp. Because
this is one of those things, Shaun, also where if I'm the Texans, if I'm D'Amico, I go to Cal and say, you know what? Make Johnathan Joseph an offer he can't refuse to come in and coach our staff, because
defensive assistant.
He's just too valuable. You could pay coaches whatever you want to. And with his knowledge and the respect that he has it was funny because I heard him tell you that Dameon Pierce played for the Texans a long time ago. Boy, oh boy, Shaun, I must be 90 years old, because it was like 4 years ago. I feel like I took a shower and it's 4 years later.
Yeah. I remember I had to go back and actually listen to that. I'm like, dang, I'm right there. I'm 40. It wasn't that long ago. My gosh. 4
years.
Yeah. Back in the day. But, I thought about the same thing, but I do remember Johnathan Joseph coming to a practice last year. And I know he's got like at least one younger kid. Maybe he's got, two or multiple. I don't know. I remember a little kid being around, and I think he was coaching, doing some work at the school. Look, hey, guys put in crazy hours for a long time. Once you leave that NFL life, as much as you want to get back into it, you don't miss the time away from your family. And so maybe he's just not ready to give that up at this point in time. Maybe he just wanted to kind of wet his beak, see if it was worth thinking about for the future. And if that's the case, then awesome. Johnathan Joseph, regardless of what Jalen Pitre or Damian Pierce said, he's still young. And hey, look, for that matter, so are we for the most part, right? He'll have an opportunity if he wants to join up with a staff. In particular, we hope it's this one with D'Amico at some point in time.
Yeah, you say, oh yeah, pay him some money, I guess, and maybe that's a stupid comment by me because Johnathan Joseph, if I recall, he made a few dollars when he was in the NFL. He's probably doing pretty
The
well.
Texans gave him the best contract I think he ever had in his NFL career, and rightfully so. Up until this past offseason, it was probably the most significant offseason signing in franchise history, Daniel Manning and Johnathan Joseph. I don't think it's even close.
Yeah, I just looked it up. He made $85 million in his career, so he's fine. He
Pretty
didn't
good.
he didn't need anything from Cal McNair anymore. Let me ask you, Sean, about one Michael Brantley, because he's back. Did you throw a party, Michael Brantley party?
2 days in a row, too. And the second, only better than the first, 2 out RBIs in the third inning. How about that? I mean, shocker. Like, if he's healthy, I don't think there was any question that the guy was going to, produce for you. I don't think there would have been as much emphasis on a guy that they doubted could still hit at this level. So I'm not surprised. I'm just glad, Dusty Baker was asked in a roundabout way, does he feel like his team, this lineup is whole again? And Dusty was like, well, it's never whole unless everybody's clicking, on the same cylinder at the same time, right? But I tell you what, with the way the bats have, turned on, and you infuse Brantley into the equation, you have to feel fantastic about it. I get it. Like, the major questions are, well, how do you keep Yainer Diaz's bat in there routinely? How do you keep him fresh? Hell, he just played in the longest stretch of baseball games for this team that he had all season long. I think he played in like 16 straight games. Longest stretch he'd gone before that is like 2 stretches of 13, and then they usually break him up like three on and a day off, 2 on, a day off. There's been no rhyme or reason early.
If he's playing, Sean, if Yainer Diaz is in the lineup at catcher, okay, let me stress at catcher where he should be playing.
Don't be greedy now. Just get his bat in the lineup.
No. If he's in what I'm saying though is if he's in the lineup at catcher, you look at this lineup that they can trot out there. I'm just gonna make the bold statement. This is the best lineup in Astros history because first of all, the Astros have never had a catcher as they can hit like Yainer Diaz. But let's go through this lineup for a second. Ooh. Jose Altuve, former MVP. Alex Bregman, former top 3 MVP guy. Yordan Alvarez, top 2 MVP guy. Kyle Tucker, I don't think I need to tell you anybody about Kyle Tucker. Jose Abreu, former MVP. I know he's not the same Jose Abreu, but he's starting to look a little bit, maybe post-injury, you got a little bit more of that. Chas McCormick, oh my God, he's got around a 900 OPS, and he's turned into an all-star level player and, just an incredible hitter. And then, back of your lineup are guys like Jeremy Pena, who all of a sudden looks like, World Series MVP Jeremy Pena, ALCS MVP Jeremy Pena. He looks fantastic. I haven't even mentioned Yainer Diaz yet. This lineup from beginning to end right now, if you put out Yainer Diaz at catcher and Michael Brantley out there, who's, we know what Michael Brantley is, 300 hitter throughout his career, one of the better hitters in baseball. It's the best lineup in Astros history.
I don't know, man. I have to go back and look. And the reason why I say it is maybe off the top of your head, the thing that kills it for me, because you tried to excuse it away, is Abreu's bat. Right? Okay, yeah, maybe getting closer, but hey, it ain't what you thought you were buying in the offseason.
Is Abreu's bat, though? Here's the thing with Abreu's bat. Is it better than the catchers that you've had over the years Robinson Chirinos, or I'm trying to remember.
Abreu to a catcher? Like, let's call apples to apples. Is Abreu's bat this year better than batting title Yuli 2 years ago? No.
No, but you can't compare it to that, because I'm saying Yainer Diaz, we got nothing to compare. We have no, that's my point. We have no catcher to compare to Yainer Diaz.
Yeah, but he's not going to be the everyday catcher.
No, but I'm saying you missed my entire intro. With Yainer Diaz in at catcher, with Yainer Diaz in at catcher, with Yainer Diaz in at catcher, Dusty Baker, Sean Dusty Baker Bijani.
I'll let you have it. Go ahead.
Yainer Diaz at catcher. This is the best lineup, period.
I mean, it's without question. They haven't had a good hitting catcher since when? I mean, I don't know. Like,
never. Well, they had who was the backup was he a backup? Eusebio? He was a pretty good hitter.
Well, I mean, he started for a little bit.
Mitch Molesky for a season, maybe. I mean, that's it. That's the list right there.
Yeah. And if you want to like parse up Brad Ausmus's first 2 months of like every year of his Astros career, when he was hitting like 416 before hitting like 093 the next 3 months.
Oh, BG, I should say Biggio when he was Biggio. I'm sorry. My apologies to Craig Biggio. Yeah, that's probably your best hitting.
Well, I figured you didn't want to go back 30 years, so I was gonna just let that one pass.
But my point is, the Biggio teams when he was the catcher were not very good. They're offensively, they weren't very good around him.
I mean,
so
let's put it in a vacuum. Okay, so Yainer Diaz is your catcher every single day, and Jose Abreu's bat is still what it is, largely inconsistent and old.
But
hold on. I'm gonna ask you a question. Hold on.
It's in a vacuum.
In a vacuum, you're gonna put your best lineup you just mentioned with those two guys out there. You're gonna put that up against one of the most historically prolific Astros offenses that we'd seen during this 6-year stretch of dominance in the American League. 2017 and 2019's offenses, like,
well, for the whole season. But Sean, people don't get it right now. I'm talking about right now. I'm not talking about the last 3 or 4 months. I'm not talking when Jordan wasn't playing and Altuve wasn't playing. I'm saying today, right now, with Yainer Diaz and Michael Brantley. Remember, the Astros, with all the crap that's happened this year, they're number five in runs scored in baseball. They're number 5.
Yeah,
with all of that other junk.
I think they're 6th in run differential.
They've got if Yainer's in the lineup, they have 6 starters with a 800 OPS or above. I mean, like, people are just you go on Twitter, and Twitter is the trash can of of comments, but you go on Twitter, and every time the Astros have an outing where they score 1 run or 2 runs, everybody is like griping about the offense and the hitters. That look, if you listen to us, you know it. If you watch the games, you know it. This team's issues have never. It's not the offense. It's starting pitching.
Well, there you go.
Starting pitching. But this offense.
Now that you mentioned that,
we got to start respecting the fact that Jose Altuve looks like 2017 Jose Altuve right now.
Of course, 100%. Now that you mentioned and you kind of furthered, the discussion and the overall point of why we are not as confident in this year's team as we've been in years past, it is the starting pitching. I'll ask you this question. Your perfect lineup that you just broke down, take that every single day into the postseason. Do you, and keep the starting pitching as is, multiple question marks, seemingly every night. How confident are you in this ball club to contend for a World Series this year with your greatest offensive lineup that you just put out there?
Well, the issue is the nights that everybody criticizes the Astros for not hitting, it's typically because they run into great pitching, and great pitching in the playoffs beat you. And unfortunately,
it has to be met
we'll never see this lineup in the postseason because Yainer's going to be rotting on the bench in the postseason.
And I just don't think so. I really don't.
Where do you play? Do you think that Dusty would play Yainer Diaz over Michael? Because the only place that Yainer could play he ain't playing him at first base. He has no confidence in him defensively in a postseason game to play Yonder at first base. The only place he's going to play in a postseason, he's not playing for Maldi. We know that.
He played Trey Mancini at first base last year, and he made the play of the series. Saved
well,
your
Trey
ass.
Mancini was a longtime first baseman and a natural first baseman.
That's fine, but he'd also spent the entire season before you acquired him in left field, and you refused to play him in left field for like a month and a half, while he was already on the team. I'm saying, I don't think Yainer Diaz has flubbed up once at first base.
No, he's had some flubs over there. Yeah, definitely had some.
Has he made an error?
He's had those two balls to get by him on pickoff throws, and I don't think either one of those were necessarily the pitcher. But the other thing is, the error doesn't matter to me.
Let's just not get nitpicky. All I'm saying is that
what matters to me is
the guy out there.
What matters to me isn't errors. It's there are plays that you can make that just make guys look better, and guys are not going to throw balls right into your glove every time. You're going to have to make those scoop plays. You're going to have to make those plays, and that's the issue with him. Not that Abreu's been great at it, but Abreu has played a big long career at first base, and that's his
position. You got a hell of a lot used to seeing a Gold Glove first baseman over there for years.
I'm the person that said everybody just when I said they shouldn't have got rid of Yuli and it was a waste of. I had a lot of people come back. Oh, Yuli was washed up. Yuli was this. Look, Yuli was never washed up over at first base defensively, and with what Abreu has given you this year offensively, and what Yuli's given offensively, to me, this wasn't a quite. And a lot of people out there dump on Dusty because he's into defense more than offense on most guys. Where I was all aboard with the defense instead of offense was what Yuli Gurriel brought you at first base, and you had to bring somebody that was for sure like not going to fall off a cliff offensively, and then just be not good for you defensively. And Abreu, unfortunately, fell off that cliff, and so it looks like a terrible move.
Unpredictable to that proportion. Nobody forecasted, literally the same kind of fall off that we experienced with Yuli Gurriel last year, and even then it wasn't that bad. Like Abreu was worse.
But at least the great thing about Yuli is even if he falls off, you figure he's not going to fall off defensively. I mean, he had some struggles at times defensively, but when Yuli had struggles, it was like, oh my God, Yuli always makes that. You got so used to him making.
Struggles so he doesn't make like one play every blue moon. So I wouldn't even count that as a struggle. Like it's baseball, stuff happens, but ultimately, this team, they've got the opportunity in this stretch upcoming. The 3 with the Yankees, it starts Friday. The 3 with the Rangers, thereafter. You still got another series with the Mariners later on in the season. Like, how big does that series look now in comparison to what we thought it was going to look like 3 weeks ago, even? And then some really easy series. This is where having the 3rd easiest remaining schedule in all of Major League Baseball, I guess, is factored in, is that you've got the multiple series with the A's and the Royals upcoming as well. I'm not worried about that. To me, metal meets the road here against the Yankees and the Rangers in this stretch, because you are as close as you'd been in a month to playing good baseball and having the opportunity to step on the throat and seize control of the AL West. Now you would just be doing it against a different team in the Mariners, who lead you by a game, versus the Rangers, who had led you, wire to this point. From start to this point is what I meant to say. They're playing some of their best baseball that they had offensively, but I'm going to say overall too, because Framber Valdez has shown signs, like recording 31 straight outs over 3 starts. It looks like maybe he's starting to figure some stuff out. JP France coming off of that horrible 2 1/3 outing in which he just got blasted. 11 hits, 10 runs. He puts together a quality outing his next time out. Christian Javier, he's still struggling, with some walks and pitch count to get you to 5. He hasn't gotten you to 6 in I don't know how long, but it's still much more encouraging, these last 2 outings by him, than what we'd been used to seeing the month and a half prior.
Well,
Justin Verlander.
JP France, let me just say, JP France had one bad outing. Fromber,
I just mentioned that. Yeah, but
but that's like, not showing, like you said, showing signs that they're getting it together. JP France never had showed much sign that it was falling apart. You know, I agree.
He didn't look like that at any point in time this season, okay, is what I meant to say. And obviously, we all know he just ended a string of like 9 out of 10 quality starts with that horrible outing of the day. But Justin Verlander, put together another really good performance. Looked a little bit closer to the Mets version of the Justin Verlander the last couple of months than the one the Astros got. So for those reasons, I'm encouraged.
Yeah, Verlander, you're right. Fromber, hopefully, like I want to see him string together a couple more, but it's a start for Fromber. Christian Javier, I guess I'm not as much buying into, but yeah, you make some points with at least two of the guys. Let me ask you, Sean, and I want to get away from the Astros for our last few seconds here, and I'm gonna get your thoughts on this. What do you think of this photo right here?
Fire. It was awesome, man. I love the Cougs gall to go and do this. They're watching the Texans, tiptoe around this crap with the Titans. They're going to allow the Titans to punk them when they go up there and face them this season. They're going to be wearing their Oiler throwbacks. The Cougars said, you know what? To heck with all this mess. We're going to do it, and we're going to do it better than the Texans probably could have thought about doing it. And the field has the blue Houston. It's going to be an amazing opening weekend for college football in Houston. Everybody who's anybody in football, I think, in town that's not tied up doing other football things is going to be at TDECU on Saturday watching this, being a part of it. It's going to be an incredible environment for the first ever Big 12 game for Houston Cougar football.
Yeah, Sean was talking about, if you're listening to us on the podcast, he was talking about that. He was talking about this.
Houston has the Oilers, the greatest football team. We take the ball from goal to goal like no one's ever seen. We're in the air, we're on the ground.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love it. And that we're talking about the Cougars uniform looking exactly with the colors and everything like the old Oilers. The colors similar, scheme similar. Not obviously they don't have the Derrick on the helmet, but the rest of it was really good.
Still, it's one of the most beautiful things I've seen, man, to come to fruition. I think the Rockets came out with like that Oiler blue within recent years. Maybe they wore it like twice. The Astros need to do something, man. Just like double rods to Bud Adams. It doesn't need to make sense. It's not just to Bud Adams. It's to the entire state of Tennessee. That, hey, your blue, your Columbia blue that you think you're stealing solely from the Oilers, it's actually a Houston thing, not just an Oiler thing, and we're going to own it, and we're going to own it better than you ever could dream of. So I think the Astros, the Rockets, the Cougars, the Texans, you need to get on board, figure it out, hurry up, get through with all your crossing T's, dotting I's with the NFL and all that garbage. And make it happen. Get the Columbia blue, the red, the white going on one of these unis in 2024. Let's see it.
The Astros stick with the orange, but man, I don't know how many times I got to say it. You got to bring out the old rainbow jerseys more often. You got to bring out the Tequila Sunrise, the classics. That's the most fun thing that the Astros have ever done. It's iconic. It is an iconic uniform. Everybody knows who it is, the team immediately. And so we don't need you having Columbia blue. If you want to change the uniform up a little bit, and we've seen the Tequila Sunrise, but not as much this year, and it seems like the last couple of years, but that is the one that needs to come out more often. I mean, I'm sorry, the Space City's fine. I like the Space City jersey.
It's terrible.
But
it's terrible.
But yeah, that's the key. That's the big one.
I need to see them. They're going to change it up. They always, these the marketing teams with these organizations, Texans and Astros specifically. I don't know too much about the Rockets. I think they try way too hard. Of course, maybe I was in the minority, but I really like the San Diego Rocket throwback unis last year. I get the comparison. Maybe it was a little too much Seattle, but whatever. I thought it was cool. The marketing teams, I think, for the most part, design teams for these unis, pretty spot on, man. And Texans are getting after it. They're doing some things. I know it's going to be pretty cool in 2024. I think it's March when they're going to unveil their plans for all the uniforms, the 4 different uniforms they're going to have. So it'll be cool. I'm looking forward to it.
I said it last week or last show. I'm going to say it one more time, just for everybody that, loves their Houston sports history. If you love the Houston sports history, we have done so many interviews talking about Houston sports history with ex-players, ex-broadcasters, legends, J.R. Richard. I mean, there's a long list. Jimmy Wynn, whatever. Go into the archives. The best thing to do is just go on YouTube and go to the Houston sports history playlist. And there's almost 200 videos there about Houston sports, with, clips and interviews with Houston sports history in it. It's one of the things that I'm most proud of for the show, that we really highlighted that and, kept those people alive, and they're all connected. I mean, you hear those names, Sean, when you listen to the broadcast. They talk about Jimmy Wynn and J.R. Richard and, Alan Ashby, or, all these guys that used to play, Dan Pastorini, if you talk about the Houston Oilers, and of course, Alvin Bethea and Robert Brazil that were in the Hall of Fame. We talked to them, talked to Brazil more than one time. So go check that. There's an incredible interview that I love. It's one of my favorites with Mickey Herskowitz about the entire, Astros history and Rockets history. And he was there for the beginning of all that stuff. So that is definitely worth a listen. I'm not sure when our next show is. We'll have to see about where me and Sean are on Monday with Labor Day, but definitely we're going to talk to you at some time, hopefully on Monday or Tuesday of next week. And then we're not that long before we're doing a live Texans postgame for real, like the real game.
Game week next week, man. It's going to be on. It's game week. It's already here. All
right, let's do it. We'll talk to you again.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.